Thank you, Margaret. You've heard a lot about what this is. I think you all understand now why we need to do something about this. Anybody have any questions about that? Now we're going to hear about how we can fight it. And we're going to hear from Kevin Zeese. Kevin is a lawyer with 30 years of experience in social advocacy across a broad spectrum of issues, ranging from the drug war to anti-war work to social and economic justice. He's president of Common Sense for Drug Policy, and he's on the steering committee of the Bradley Manning Support Network. He's the other co-director of It's Our Economy, also co-hosts Clearing the Fog Radio, and is an organizer at popularresistance.org. He currently serves as Attorney General for the Green Shadow Cabinet. So, Kevin, come up here and tell us what we can do.
Well, thank you all for making it through this great long day. It's really been phenomenal stuff right from the beginning. I really want to thank the Public Banking Institute for putting on a great conference. This is really an excellent conference. Let me say that this battle against the Trans-Pacific Partnership is an epic battle. It is the people of the world against transnational corporate power. I can tell you this, the people are going to win. We are going to win this battle. And I think the recipe for winning is evident. And it's evident in that quote that Margaret just gave from Ron Kirk. If we know what's in it, it's not going to pass. Well, sounds real good, doesn't it? So I think we have two goals as our first two goals. One, release the text. Stop the secrecy. We want a transparent government. We want to see transparency in government. We want to know what's in the laws that are being passed. That's what this is. A trade agreement is a law. Second, no fast track. We believe in the rule of law. We believe in the Constitution. Checks and balances. Congress has a job to do. In the Constitution, the Congress is the one who enters into trade agreements, into treaties, not the president. Congress needs to keep their power. We need to stop fast track. We need to stop trade promotion authority. And they know that if we win those two battles, we will win the war. If people know what's in it and Congress does its job, we will stop this trade agreement. Now, how are we going to do it? Well, the first thing we want to do is we want to create solidarity. Every issue we care about, healthcare, labor, environment, climate change, you finance regulation, labor laws, wages, the race to the bottom on so many issues, these are all going to be adversely affected by the Trans-Pacific Partnership. This is an opportunity to bring the movement together into a movement that's against the rule of money, against corporate power, against transnational corporations, in favor of people and planet before profit. That is what we stand for. We announced a project this week that was a continuation of our resistance work after about a year of talking with colleagues and trying to figure out how to bring the movement to the next level. We decided to put together a project with about 50 people who are advisors on it now called Popular Resistance. If you haven't seen this card, popularresistance.org, people viewing and watching this on live stream, popularresistance.org, go to it, sign up for it. We announced that our first campaign is going to be to stop the TPP. And there's several steps to that. First is the solidarity, bring people together. And the second step is education. All transformation begins with education. You know, we've been going around the country, Margaret and I and Arthur, talking about the TPP. Arthur's been doing it for about 3 years. We've been doing it about a year and a half. And what we found when we started was that almost nobody in the activist community had heard of the TPP. They had been very successful at negotiating this thing in secret, quietly, with no one knowing. And that's begun to change. Now when we go to audiences, I'd say about 30 to 40% of activists know about it. I bet in this room we had even a higher percentage. And when people know about it, they get active on it. What we did, in fact, when we first got, one of the first projects we got involved in was just around the time of the Democratic Convention last year. They had a round of meetings in Leesburg, Virginia. They did it out in a resort. It was a secret meeting. You know, they didn't want the press didn't show up, of course, and the corporate advisors were online watching it and you know, keeping track of what was going on. What we decided to do to let the public know what was going on was we flew a gigantic series of weather balloons with two big ones that looked like a crack of a behind. We had some shorts on them, and it said, "Free trade my ass." This is flying over their secret meeting. And coming out of those balloons was a long strand that said, "Flush the TPP." Hope you can remember that. TPP, Toilet Paper Plus. So flushthetpp.org is a website you can send people to. It's on our economic site right now, but we're going to be developing a campaign on popular resistance around it. Flushthetpp.org is a great way to get lots of resources. That's one great site. Arthur's site is also excellent. Citizenstrade.org is a great way to get information. The first step is education. Spread the word to people. Let people know what's going on. The Green Shadow Cabinet is going to be announcing next week that this is going to be a campaign we're going to take on as well. What we're going to have is we're going to have people who are we have about 100 people, by the way, involved in this alternative government. And they're really, Guy Alperovitz, who was here earlier, really top-notch people are involved in this effort. We're going to be putting out reports from our labor group, from our finance group, our environmental group, our climate group, explaining how the TPP adversely affects those issues. So follow the Green Shadow Cabinet as reports come out. Share them with your networks. We are the media, folks. The corporate media has no credibility. Their readership is declining. Their profits are disappearing. Their viewers are minimal. We are the media. The people in this room and watching on TV now can tell the world the truth about the TPP. If we act in solidarity and with intention to let the world know what the truth is, we can do it. We all have networks. We have email lists. We have websites we're part of. We have Facebook. We have social networks. We have Twitter. All sorts of ways to get the word out. If we act together, we can educate the country on this issue, and that's the first step towards success. So flush the TPP, citizens trade. And you can even educate people on the right wing about this, because really at the root of this issue is the issue of sovereignty. The issue of sovereignty. You know, we've heard a little bit about these trade tribunals, this whole new governmental system that's being created. Let me just tell you one piece about that you can tell to anyone on the political spectrum, and they'll get nauseated. Tell them that these trade tribunals will be made up of 3 judges, and most of those judges will be corporate lawyers on leave from their corporate job and then ruling for the corporation and then going back to their corporate job. That's a rigged system, allowing them to sue governments over environmental regulations, environmental laws, over labor laws. So you think little Vietnam that's in poverty is going to pass an environmental law where they're going to get sued by GE or JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or Monsanto? You think they're going to pass an environmental law and face that lawsuit with the judges they know come from the corporations? That environmental law is not going to be passed. And so if you care about the environment, if you care about labor, you've got to be concerned about this. And so anyone who's in any part of the political spectrum is going to be concerned about the loss of sovereignty in this global corporate coup. And that's what this is, a global corporate coup. Things like SOPA, the control of the internet, that couldn't get through Congress. They're trying to pit that through the TPP. Electronic Freedom Foundation's put out reports on that if you want to see what that's about. On issue after issue, we're going to see a movement toward privatization, neoliberalism, and corporatism. And so educate. The second thing we have to do is protest. Resistance works. And I'll explain the history of that a little bit in the latter part of this talk. Resistance works. I'll just give you one example during Occupy. You may remember during Occupy that the Super Committee, remember the Super Committee? Super Committee. They were up there. They were going to solve the deficit problem. Remember that? They were meeting. They had 3 public meetings. That's all, 3. They had a bunch of private ones where they were planning, and then Obama was negotiating the grand bargain with them. And they're going to cut Medicare, cut Social Security, cut veterans benefits, cut all sorts of social programs in order to balance the budget. Well, you know, we protested that. We were occupying Washington, D.C. at Freedom Plaza. We had one great activist, Leah Bolger, who was at the time the head of Veterans for Peace, who walked up to one of the few committee meetings they held. She got in the audience. They started. She walked up to the front of the committee, right in front of them, so C-SPAN could see it. and told them, she was wearing a great shirt, said, "Greed kills." White letters, black shirt, "Greed kills." And she said, "Stop lying to the public. We know how to end the debt. Stop the wars and tax the rich." Now, there's a simple message. And then we had people outside the hallway protesting, outside the building protesting. Occupy Wall Streeters marched down from New York City, from Philadelphia, from Baltimore. And we held a super committee hearing on Freedom Plaza, C-SPAN cover. We put forward our own deficit plan, the 99% deficit plan, and it solved the deficit problem in 3 years because we stopped the wars and taxed the rich. And so we were able to put that forward. And what happened was the super committee, they snuck out of town without even holding a press conference. They didn't put out a report. It didn't happen. They were stopped because they were afraid of what kind of explosion would happen. We've got to make them afraid of us. We've got to make them afraid of us. You know, Chris Hedges tells this great story. Chris Hedges, who's a good colleague of ours, tells this great story of Nixon sitting in the White House. He had put up buses, empty buses, surrounding the White House during the Vietnam War protests. And he leans over to Henry Kissinger, he says, Henry, they're going to get through those buses. They're coming in here. They're going to get through. That's what we want them to be thinking. That's where they should be. So protest. We're going to protest. We're going to protest Congress members at their home offices in Washington, D.C. We're going to protest Monsanto, Walmart, the agribusiness, and the J.P. Morgans and the big finance that are behind this. They're going to know the people are riled up, and they're going to know Ron Kirk was right. If the people know what's in this, it's not going to pass. That's what we're going to show them, and we're going to make that happen. It's going to win. And you know what happens when we win? We're going to build on that. We're going to build so we can get public banking. We're going to build so we can break up the big banks, so we can create a finance system for the people, which is what Margaret and I will be talking about tomorrow, creating a finance system for the people and a health system for the people. When we win TPP, the people will show they can beat transnational corporate power. And that's how you build movements. You build movements on winning. You build movements on winning. So I know everyone has their own issues and their own concerns, but this is an issue that should unite us, and if we win this issue, we can win the other issues. So let's join together. Let me just quickly talk a little bit, do I have a little time still? To talk about how we know what works. You know, there's a book out actually called Why Civil Resistance Works. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend you check it out. It's a 100-year history of the last century of civil resistance efforts. And it's a kind of an empirical study. And it looks at, you know, what works and what doesn't. They start, by the way, with comparing violent versus nonviolent movements. And there's no question nonviolent wins much more often. I'm not saying violent never wins, but nonviolent wins much more often than violent does. The track record is quite clear. But then they look at nonviolent movements and they say, why did this one fail and this one succeed? And they start to analyze it, and they look at it, and they start to look for what the issues are. And basically what it comes down to is mass movements succeed and fringe movements fail. We need to become a mass movement. Mass movements succeed and fringe movements fail. How do you become a mass movement? Several steps. First, you become a mass movement by first having a vision that's supported by most Americans. We have that. You know, we've looked at polling of Americans. We did this before the Occupy in Washington, D.C. We looked at polling. We found that American people are much more with us on issue after issue after issue than the media tells us. The public, despite the myth-making media that provides us misinformation more than accurate information, tries to manipulate us to a corporate perspective, the people don't buy it. Their credibility is down, and the people are right on the issues. So our vision is end the rule of money. Make sure that people and planet come before profits. That is a vision that will be supported by a majority of Americans. And just like during the Civil Rights Movement, when the end of Jim Crow was the issue, the end of segregation was the issue, the end of racial unfairness was the issue, not everybody got involved in fighting for that. Even though majorities supported it, and majorities support our view, not everybody's going to get involved. But everybody doesn't have to get involved. What we saw with Occupy was the power of people. I would say at the maximum, Occupy had probably 400,000, maybe 300,000, 400,000 people involved at its peak. And most of those were in Oakland. And that's about 0.1% of the population. 0.1%. Look at the fear they had. The whole Obama national security apparatus, Homeland Security, FBI, got involved with working with all the police departments across the country. They infiltrated, they divided, they undermined, they sent down criminals to occupy camps to cause trouble. They worked against us. They were afraid of us. 0.1% of us. 0.1%. What happens when we get to 1%? We go from 300,000 to 3 million. Oh, they'll be scared. And we can do that. We can do that. That's within our reach. And what happens when we get to 10%? I'll tell you what it shows. The research shows at 10% we win. At 10% we win. And that's where we're going, folks. And the first step is winning the Trans-Pacific Partnership. How do you build a mass movement? You build a mass movement by weakening the pillars of power that hold the status quo in place. Again, this is shown by research. Another great website you may want to check out if you don't know it already is the Albert Einstein Institute, aeinstein.org. You can download all sorts of books there for free. They have over 200 tactics you can use in nonviolent movements to give you ideas of what you can try to do. But the basic thrust is you want to build our mass movement by pulling people from the pillars of power. What are the pillars of power? Youth are key. Labor is key. Media is key. Business, religious, nonprofits, civil servants, police, and military. That's the pillars of power. And the goal is not to get everybody from those to our side, but to pull people from those pillars to the movement so we become a mass movement and the pillars that hold the status quo in place become weaker. That is how we win. That is how we build a mass movement that strengthens our power and weakens their power. And by the way, the research shows that if you can break up the police and military, start to pull some of those to our side, your chances of winning are 60% more likely. Those are two key ones. That's why nonviolence is more successful, because who wants to, join a movement that's having a war with the police and military, and how the police and military won't join you. In fact, we saw this in Occupy. You might remember this scene in Wall Street. Second weekend of Occupy Wall Street, they had marches at Union Square. The police divided the marches up, arrested some people. They had some women behind some orange mesh. And Officer Joe Bologna, what a great name, went over and sprayed pepper spray in the faces of women who were already under arrest. They were not doing anything. They were behind orange mesh. And the video showed, there were citizens media, which is so critical. 6 or 7 different cameras had the video of this pepper spray, and they showed that these women were not doing anything wrong. And you could see on the video, one of the officer, Joe Bologna, was a commander, white shirt cop. One of the blue-collar cops, the street cops, you could hear him on the tape saying, "Wow, I can't believe he just pepper sprayed them." Divide the cops, right? That divided the cops. It showed it. And then that night, you had on MSNBC, Larry O'Donnell did a monologue, whose father was a cop, by the way. His father was a cop. He did a monologue supporting the occupiers. We got the media, we're getting the public. And so you saw how acting, now if those women, on the other hand, had been doing violence, throwing apples or batteries or saying war on pigs, done something, to antagonize the police, that blue-collar cop would have said, "Thank goodness he pepper sprayed them." And Larry O'Donnell would have said, those protesters deserved it. But because they were acting with strategic intelligence, they actually helped to grow the movement. Now, of course, the government sent in infiltrators and things changed, and then we have to watch out for that. But that is how you build a movement. That's what we can do to win this battle. Let me just close with one final thing. You heard from Gar Alperovitz how we're in this moment of history, perhaps. I think we are in this moment of history. He focused on what we call we have a two-track strategy, where you protest what you don't like and build what you want. We call it stop the machine, create a new world. He focused on the create the new world part, the cooperatives, public banks, people advocating for single-payer health care, people putting in place all sorts of new economic models for controlling housing. But there's also the other side, which is the protest side, which is also bubbling up, the stop the machine side. We on this popularresistance.org website, which if you ever get depressed and think nothing's happening, go to popularresistance.org, because we track what's happening. You will see that there are protesters, resistors acting all the time, challenging the system. Resistance is growing. Resistance is bubbling up. We are creating a movement, and the media is not covering it, But we don't expect the media to cover it because our media is going to cover it. We're going to let people know that this is happening. And so we're in this moment where you see resistance growing, we see building growing. Both Stop the Machine, Create the World are getting bigger, and the government is not responding. The government is being dysfunctional and corrupt. The economy is being dysfunctional and corrupt. That's going to mean that it's going to keep growing. Both of our stop and build is going to keep growing. Now, some of you may have heard this phrase, the Great Turning. It's been around for about 10 or 15 years now. That's what we're in the middle of. We're in the middle of a great turning. This is an epic moment in history, and it's a time when we are facing multiple crises at the same time: energy, environment, wealth divide, housing, healthcare. We have 15 different crises listed on popularresistance.org. And this is a moment when these crises are coming together at the same time that people are waking up. The awakening and the crisis. This great turning, folks, is what we're in, and we're going to start to turn the tide in our favor when we stop the TPP. Thank you all very much.